Tensions between the US and China are escalating, impacting everything from the global economy to the technology in your pocket. But why? Why have the world's two biggest powers drifted into a bitter rivalry that could shape the future of our planet? In this video, we're diving deep into the core issues: trade wars, military face-offs, and the clash of ideologies, to uncover the real reasons behind this growing conflict. If you want to understand what's really at stake, stick around, because it's more than just politics. It's a global power struggle. 1. Economic competition and trade wars. One of the most significant reasons behind the deteriorating relationship between the US and China is the economic rivalry that has intensified over the past few decades. As China's economy rapidly grew to become the second largest in the world, it posed a challenge to the US's economic dominance. Trade deficits. The United States has long complained about its trade deficit with China. For years, China exported far more to the US than it imported, creating an economic imbalance. US administrations, particularly under President Donald Trump, argued that China was engaging in unfair trade practices, such as manipulating its currency to make its exports cheaper and subsidizing domestic industries, which hurt American companies. Tariffs and trade war. In response, the US imposed tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, triggering a tit-for-tat trade war. China retaliated by imposing its own tariffs on American products, particularly agricultural goods, which hit US farmers hard. Although both countries have since engaged in trade talks, the underlying economic tensions remain unresolved. Technology competition. The US is concerned that China's rise as a tech powerhouse threatens its own dominance and innovation. Companies like Huawei, a leader in 5G technology, have become symbols of China's tech rise. The US has accused Huawei of being a national security threat, claiming that its technology could be used for espionage. In response, the US has placed Huawei on a trade blacklist and pressured allies to avoid using its equipment. 2. Geopolitical rivalry in Asia-Pacific. The geopolitical competition between the US and China is particularly intense in the Asia-Pacific region, where China seeks to expand its influence while the US tries to maintain its historical role as the dominant power. South China Sea disputes. One of the most visible points of contention is the South China Sea, a strategic waterway through which a significant portion of global trade flows. China has claimed vast areas of the South China Sea as its own, constructing artificial islands and militarizing them. The US, along with other countries, rejects these territorial claims and conducts freedom of navigation patrols to challenge China's actions. Taiwan. The US support for Taiwan is another flashpoint. China considers Taiwan a breakaway province and has vowed to reunify it with the mainland by force if necessary. The US does not officially recognize Taiwan as an independent country, but it maintains unofficial relations and supplies Taiwan with military equipment. This has led to frequent tensions, with China warning the US not to interfere in what it considers an internal matter. Military buildup. China has been rapidly modernizing its military, with a particular focus on developing capabilities that could challenge US forces in the region. The US, in response, has strengthened its alliances with countries like Japan, South Korea, and Australia to counterbalance China's growing influence. 3. Technology and intellectual property theft. Another significant source of tension is China's approach to technology and intellectual property, IP. The US has long accused China of engaging in widespread intellectual property theft, which has had a detrimental impact on American businesses. IP theft. According to reports from the US government and private sector, Chinese hackers have stolen sensitive data from American companies and government agencies, ranging from trade secrets to defense technologies. The US argues that this unfairly gives Chinese companies an advantage in the global market, as they can replicate American innovations without investing in research and development. Forced technology transfers. The U.S. also claims that China uses unfair practices to force American companies operating in China to hand over technology. This is often done as a condition for market access, where U.S. companies must form joint ventures with Chinese firms and share their proprietary technology. The U.S. has implemented various measures to counter what it perceives as Chinese economic espionage, including sanctions on Chinese companies, banning specific Chinese tech firms from accessing U.S. technology, and prosecuting individuals for intellectual property theft. However, these actions have exacerbated tensions between the two nations. 4. Human rights concerns. Human rights issues have increasingly become a source of conflict between the U.S. and China, particularly under the Biden administration, which has made promoting democracy and human rights a cornerstone of its foreign policy. Xinjiang. One of the most controversial issues is China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang region. The U.S. has accused China of committing genocide against the Uyghur population, citing reports of mass internment camps, forced labor, and restrictions on religious freedoms. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on Chinese officials and companies involved in the abuses, but China denies the accusations, calling them an internal matter. Hong Kong. The situation in Hong Kong is another flashpoint. In 2019, China imposed a national security law on Hong Kong, which many see as a move to crush the city's pro-democracy movement. The U.S., which has long supported democracy in Hong Kong, has criticized China's actions and responded by removing Hong Kong's special trade status. This has further fueled tensions, as China views U.S. involvement in Hong Kong as interference in its domestic affairs. Tibet and freedom of speech. Beyond these issues, the U.S. frequently criticizes China for its lack of political freedoms, censorship, and suppression of dissent. China's government tightly controls the internet and cracks down on activists, something the U.S. has condemned as an affront to human rights. 5. Ideological differences. Democracy versus authoritarianism. At the core of the U.S.-China tensions lies a deeper ideological clash between two competing systems of governance. The U.S. represents liberal democracy, where political freedoms, individual rights, and free markets are prioritized. China, under the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, operates as an authoritarian state with tight control over politics, media, and the economy. Global influence. The U.S. has historically sought to promote democracy around the world, while China advocates for a model of governance that prioritizes stability, state control, and economic development over political freedoms. This ideological divide is most evident in their global influence efforts. While the U.S. supports democratic movements and institutions abroad, China promotes its Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, a massive infrastructure and investment project that expands its influence across the developing world. Soft power competition. China's growing global influence, particularly in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, has raised concerns in Washington. The U.S. fears that China's model of authoritarian capitalism could gain traction globally, undermining liberal democratic values. This ideological rivalry plays out in institutions like the United Nations, where the two countries often find themselves on opposite sides of key issues. 6. The role of domestic politics. Domestic politics in both the U.S. and China play a significant role in the strained relationship between the two nations. In the U.S., politicians from both major parties have adopted a more assertive approach toward China, perceiving it as a strategic rival. Anti-China sentiment has become a bipartisan issue, especially amid accusations that China mishandled the corona pandemic. In China, nationalism plays a significant role in shaping its foreign policy. The Chinese government portrays itself as standing up to foreign interference and protecting national sovereignty, a narrative that resonates with many Chinese citizens. President Xi Jinping has positioned himself as a strong leader defending China's interests on the global stage, which has led to a more assertive foreign policy. The deteriorating relationship between the U.S. and China is the result of a complex mix of economic rivalry, geopolitical competition, technological conflict, human rights issues, and deep ideological differences. While both countries have economic incentives to cooperate, particularly given their interdependence in trade, the growing list of contentious issues makes it difficult to envision a return to the more cooperative relations of the past. Going forward, the US and China will likely continue to clash on key issues, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, on trade and technology, and over human rights concerns. The global community will be closely watching how this rivalry evolves, as it has far-reaching implications for international diplomacy, economic stability, and global security. And that's a wrap on today's deep dive into why the US and China have such tense relationships. The dynamics between these two global powers are complex, but understanding them helps us make sense of the shifting world around us. If you found this video insightful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated with more content on geopolitics and global affairs. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video where we break down another crucial global issue. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the US and China will ever resolve their differences? Let me know in the comments below. Also, feel free to share this video if you think others would benefit from this conversation. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.